Hey friend, if you've ever come up on a new year or a new month or a new project and you know you need to set goals, you know you need to plan, but it feels really overwhelming because it's like this huge, really big blank space. And if you felt like that, this video is for you. I'm Michele Perry. I'm an artist, author, creator of The Wonder Habit, and a creativity coach for creatives. I have my own small business and I wear a lot of hats. Planning for me isn't just something that is a good idea to do, it is really a necessity. I'm going to take you through my process of visual planning. It has become my go-to way to break down things that I need to plan, whether they're annual goals or they're quarterly goals for my business, or maybe they're monthly goals, or maybe it's just a project or something I want to get done that feels really overwhelming. But if I can get it out of that overwhelmed space in my head and put it on paper, it makes all the difference in the world. So in this video, we are going to cover three things. We're going to start off looking at what goals are and how can we use them in our planning in a way that is really kind to ourselves. It's so easy to make goals this big thing that is like overwhelming, intimidating, or is this checklist that just like if I don't check it off, then I feel really bad about myself because I didn't meet my goal. We're not going to do that here. We're going to talk about how do we do these things that are smart and kind together, and how visual planning, number 2, builds into that and is such a fun part. Take something that's really can be intimidating, can be overwhelming and scary, and makes it pretty approachable and I think really fun. And if you're familiar at all with mind mapping, this is going to look similar. And if you're not familiar with it, I can't wait to introduce you. It is so much fun. It's been a game changer for me in my own planning process. And while we're doing all of that, number 3, we're going to walk you through the whole thing and how I think it through and do it live. And I'm going to introduce you to some of my favorite tools, which is Archer and Olive's Square bullet journal grid notebook. This thing is amazing. It's beautiful. Gives you enough space to really build out several layers without being a huge notebook that is hard to carry around and bring with you. So I just can't wait to introduce you to this, and I'm gonna flip the camera around, grab that beverage, and let's get started. Before we jump into creating together, I just want to start us off with a few basics, just so we're starting off literally on the same page. Now, if you've been around goal setting or planning, you have probably heard the acronym SMART in terms of SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So often it's easy to think about goal setting and planning and we think about, I want to read more. Let's take that for an example. Well, reading more may be realistic and reading more is actionable, but it's not specific, measurable, or time-bound. And so if we transform I want to read more into a SMART goal, that might look like I want to read 3 books in 3 months. 3 books are measurable. That's actionable. It's specific. 3 months is time-bound. And for me, at least, that would be realistic. So that would be a SMART goal. But SMART goals feel very linear to me in terms of planning. It feels like here we are, and here is our goal, and it is one way to get there, and it is you either get there or you don't. That can lead to a lot of overwhelm and anxiety. Like, oh my gosh, am I doing it right? What happens if I don't make 3 books and I only read 2 books? And so it is helpful to a point, but it is incomplete. I think we need goals that are not just smart, they are also kind. So I'm going to write our SMART goal here. And SMART goals are awesome, but As I've mentioned, I believe they're incomplete. I think we need to pair SMART goals, but we also need them to be kind goals. So what's a kind goal? A kind goal starts with knowing our why. Why do we want to read 3 books in 3 months? I know for me, to stay on track, I really have to keep my why behind the what, like as I like to say, in focus as I'm working toward this, because that gives me context. That gives me a reason for moving forward on the days that I just don't really feel like it. Intentional progress. So instead of waiting until we reach whatever this end goal is to celebrate, it's celebrating with intention every bit of progress we make. The N, nurture curiosity. Approaching things that might feel negative with curiosity instead of condemnation and beating ourselves up for not being enough. And then D, do it all with compassion. Because goal setting is great, planning is wonderful as a tool, but if it leads to beating ourselves up and not approaching this journey with compassion, it can be so unproductive in everything that matters. One other thing. We said that SMART goals feel very linear, right? Like A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. And a lot of times we think about planning as this linear thing. We start at point A, we get to point B. That usually isn't how my journey goes. And I'm guessing maybe that's true for a lot of us. The reason why pairing kind with smart is so powerful is sometimes our journeys look a little bit more like that. And if we don't have kind as a context for smart, this can feel like failure, and it absolutely isn't. It's called being on a journey. It's a lot like what growth looks like, and it deserves to be celebrated just as well as being able to go from point A to point B. Visual planning and mind mapping. What is it? Let me give you just the big broad overview, and then you will get a lot more of the details when I break out my notebook and we actually do this. But in case you've never heard of a mind map, you've never heard of the term visual planning is this huge umbrella. Mind map is kind of like underneath the umbrella. A mind map is basically a way to show the way ideas interact with each other. So it usually starts off at its center with a big idea. And then it's like spokes of a wheel. You have kind of parts of the big idea. And then maybe you break down those parts into even smaller parts. And as you can see, this can begin to be this like huge connected picture of how all these ideas interact. And the way that I use this for planning, it's so helpful because it lets me see the big picture and some of the connections in terms of my goal setting. Okay, let me introduce you to some of my favorite tools of doing this. I usually like to have a fine line pen, a pencil, a ruler, and then I love using Archer and Olive's dot grid bullet journals that are in the square format because they give us just more visual space to be able to play with. So this is one of my other favorite things to use with this, and this is an actual, here's a little pro tip. Archer and Olive have these gorgeous packaging in their boxes, and I save them and reuse them for so many things, and this one just happened to fit my little collection of calligraph markers from them, and it's just so pretty. Let's see what this would look like potentially in a notebook for 2025. Here are some of the things I'm thinking about, and I'll give you a really good way to start out looking at this. So I'm going to use one of my lighter calligraph pens to kind of somewhere in the center here block out a square. And this is going to be my year, 2025. That's my big concept. Another use for washi tape, it makes a great thing to trace. I'm going to trace it in pencil so I don't get black on the actual tape. There's one area. If it's wonky, don't worry about it. Fix it. Just pencil. Do these circles. You can make it as beautiful and exact as you like, or it can be more of a quick and rough sketch. So I am going to go ahead and just draw my lines coming down here. So here are 4 areas of my world that I'm going to think about for 2025. And remember, I also want to think about making sure that the goals, the intentions, everything I set are kind, as well as the goals being smart. So let's think of our big areas. So for here, this is for my business. And this would be, I'm going to say, let's call this home projects. Let's call it this explore. This as wellness. I'm going to come in here with one of these beautiful calligraph pens. Just kind of color in the circle. Go ahead and color in that line as well. Business, this beautiful dusty, dark dusty blue. This is maybe one of my favorite colors in the calligraphs that I have. It's kind of this dusty lilac purple. Okay, so we have our 4 main areas. Off of these, I'm going to start writing some more specific things that are like next level down specific. Projects I want to create a cozy reading nook for my business. Grow my email list. Launch my education portal. I want to do local day trips. So that's what a mind map with some goal setting could look like for 2025. The only other thing that I want to make sure that I'm thinking through and that I add into this is that kind framework that I started us off with. The way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to set it up as a table. And for this, I'm definitely going to use a ruler here. The home project. Okay, so remember, kind, K is know your why. So I want to explore more to connect locally. Something that will be a way to make intentional progress would be a weekly drive where I drive around a new area. Nurturing my curiosity would be learning about the areas I visit, and doing it all with compassion is give myself permission to change my mind. So there you have it. This is how I would use this beautiful dark dot grid notebook from Archer and Olive to begin to brainstorm my year coming up, and just to get on paper the things that are floating around in my head, and to do that beautifully where I want to come back and look at it. I want to check in and see what is growing and going and what has changed. And this is just such a exquisite, beautiful place to keep all of these things. I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.